2020. But do they belong to the grosses or? Whatever. Not your choice. But Mazel Tov anyway. Those are all good. Second cousin to Adam's grandpa, to my mother. How you doing? Rabbi Sho Yeah.
Rabbi, good morning, sir. In a mess here. Good morning. Rabbi, good morning. Good morning. How you doing? You guys okay? Life at Fountain View is good? You taking care of yourself? They're taking care of you? You saved me a room? You're moving there? You're very lucky. I want to get a room there. I love it. It's like all these nice people. The food's pretty good. The atmosphere is lovely. It's one. All right, good morning, everyone. Boker Tov, good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Good morning. I know you're all excited because the Super Bowl is being played tomorrow. I know, I can see it on your faces. You're anxious to know what the rabbi's picking. So anyway, welcome. It's good to have everybody here. Shabbat Shalom. Well, I'm not going to tell. Come on now. There's certain advice you don't take from a rabbi. You don't take investment advice from your rabbi. You don't take health advice, medical advice from your rabbi. You don't take tax advice from your rabbi. And you don't take football scores from your rabbi.
What do we?
Yeah, what do you? Hell, I don't know. You showed up this morning. I don't know. You know. It's like, what good are you? You know, the hell good are you if you can't help me with any of that? Well, I'll give you the advice. You just go home and see if it works. You know, that's really funny. Following our learning this morning, there's a wonderful kid having his bar mitzvah, Jonathan Rappaport, in the synagogue. There's all kinds of other services going on in the building, so please join us for that. Following that, there's lunch. I have no idea what it is. Following that, there'll be Parsha study this morning, as there is most Shabbos mornings, and we're delighted to welcome everyone. This Wednesday night, College of Jewish Studies continues. We're doing the great debates that have shaped Judaism, and our guest is Rabbi Tal Sessler, who is the rabbi at the Sephardic Temple on Wilshire, and Rabbi Tessler is a PhD in Jewish thought. He teaches at the AJR, the Academy of Jewish Religion, and he'll be talking to us about the great war of early modernity between Hasidim and Misnagdim, the rise of the Hasidic movement and those who opposed it, why they opposed it. So if anybody's a Litvak, if you're a good Litvak, Lithuanian Jew, you can tell because you like your matzah brai hard, your matzah balls hard, and you like kugel with onions. It's a travesty, but that's how you are. So come on, and you'll hear the great Litvak story, and then on the other side, the Hasidic story, which is the great mystical and story. So it's a wonderful conversation. It's Wednesday night at 7, and everyone is certainly invited to that. Next week we will have. Is next week Rimonim or is it the weekend? No, next week is Shabbat Shirah. Next week is February 7th, and it's Bishalach. That's the Torah portion. So it's Shabbat Shirah. It's a Sabbath dedicated to Jewish music. And because it's also the Sabbath of Valentine's Day, Herschel and Phil have put together, our cantors have put together an evening of Jewish love songs, the history of Jewish love music. So if you have someone you love in the world or would like to, it's a great date night, come to Shul. Come at 7:30. We'll daven through the service. It's 7th. It's next Friday night. Next Friday night. So a week from yesterday. Next Friday night. Okay? Good. How you feeling?
Much better.
You doing good? Yes. You're vertical. That's a good sign. I was worried about you. Stay on earth now, okay? Is that okay? I love you. Stay on earth. I'm glad you're back. Right? So come next week. That's next Friday night. And of course, next Shabbos we'll be here. A couple of we have some guests and friends coming over the course of the month, and I'll introduce those as they come. So welcome. Did I leave anything out? Any other announcements I left out? I'm sure there's something I left out. Do you have the announcements? Let me just take a quick look and see. These are all these things that happen in the shul, and I only know about a third of them. There is a Super Bowl party tomorrow. If anyone wants to come here and watch the game, you know, we're putting on a really nice party. You pay a few dollars to the scholarship fund, and you can enjoy unlimited food and booze and cheering. It's a lot of fun. We have this. What? What kind of booze? You're asking a rabbi what kind of booze? I'll be praying. That's, you know. What? Is it? Yeah, Manischewitz. Some of the games are like that. I've watched those games. No, I don't know. It's supposed to be very nice. So I'll be here. I'll be cheering for whoever's winning. So I cheer for the commercials. That's what I love the commercials. The commercials are great. The commercials are just the best. All right, good morning. So we are, if you have a red chumash, if you don't, pick one up. If you have, anyone have a red chumash? There may be a few around. Okay, there are 4 Torah portions which cover the story of the Exodus from Egypt. In Shmot, which is the first one, we we begin the narrative of how we are enslaved. And Moses is chosen and sent to confront Pharaoh. In the middle two, in Va'era and Bo, is the confrontation between God and Pharaoh. And then finally in Beshalach, which is next week, is the closing of the story, the great climax of the story, the crossing of the Red Sea. I'll give you away the ending. The crossing of the Red Sea and the beginning of our freedom. So we're in Bo, which is on page 374. Now, in order to get a sense of this, you've got to gather in the horror of this, right? When I was a kid, and I said this before, when I was a kid, on Saturday afternoons, Pop would come home from work around 4 or 5 o'clock, and my brothers and I would gather around the television set, and on Channel 11, they had a movie program, I think it was called Chiller or Thriller or something. It was the same movie every week, except it had a different protagonist. It was always about some monster eating Tokyo, right? Or New York, or Philadelphia, or LA, right? Godzilla, Godzilla! You know, remember those movies? Right? And this Godzilla was this giant animal, you know, that would come and it breathed fire and it stomped on things. And then there were the American-made movies. There were giant grasshoppers and giant crickets and giant spiders. Usually things that should be small, blown up big. Right? One of them was very funny. There's giant rabbits. They used to jump and stomp on people, and they'd run wild through the city, destroying everything. And the army was none of the weapons could stop them. And the protagonist was always a group of scientists, and there was always this moralistic moment at the end where the little kid would turn and say, "Professor, why is this happening to us?" And the professor, the kindly professor, would look down at the young man and say, "Son, we were irresponsible in our use of science, and that's why we unleashed this horror on the world." Because it turned out that the nuclear plant dumped all the heavy water into the swamp, and that's how the alligators grew to 500 feet. Or the nuclear plant dumped heavy water into the creek, and that's why the crickets were so big and eating everybody. You know, and then the scientists would figure out how to stop the things, and that would be the end of the movie, and we would say, oh, it was a relief. When you're 10, I don't know what it is about little boys wanting to see giant things destroy stuff. You know, but there was something terribly satisfying about that, which is why those movies keep getting remade. I mean, now they're much more sophisticated, Jurassic World and Jurassic Park, but that's what it is. The Torah carries a quality of that. There's something horrifying in this. I mean, in a certain way, if you look at it from a different point of view, if you didn't know this was the Torah, and you didn't have a sense of attachment to it and a sense of reverence for it, there's something utterly horrifying about what God does to Egypt. Because what God does to Egypt is unleash this holy horror on Egypt. And it progresses one after the other. So you start with blood. You know, the main water source is poisoned and turned to blood. And frogs. And there's this image with frogs that they get into everything. You know, like there's no privacy. There's no way to shield yourself from frogs. And then bugs, and then boils, and the body itself rebels. And then you get the last several of them are the really, really, really horrifying ones. Locust. You know what a locust is? Anyone ever seen a locust? A locust is a grasshopper on steroids. I mean, a grasshopper is a cute little grasshopper. A locust is a gazuntum, you know. I mean, in Texas, we used to have these. This thing looks at you, drives an Oldsmobile, you know. I mean, a gazunta thing, you know, and then they come in the zillions and they eat all the crops. They eat all the crops. In 15 minutes. And you can't stop them, right? And then, yeah, please.
There was a story about locusts in the paper today in Africa devouring huge swaths of land.
Yeah, this still happens. They get these swarms of locusts that just devour, and there's nothing you can do about it. It just devours all the greenery in an area. And then the idea of hail, but it's hail, it's not hail. I mean, hail, mamish would be hail. Hail's bad enough. If you ever been in a hailstorm, it's kind of scary. And then this is hail that turns into fire. I mean, come on. You know, it's like, that's a good 1950s monster movie, right? Hail that turns into fire and destroys all the buildings, right? And then darkness. This sense of, I don't know, have you been seeing the pictures from Australia? There's fires in Australia? Like the whole continent's on fire. And there's, you can't stop it. I mean, there's this sense of natural, of forces beyond your control. Now, you got to gather the horror of that. I don't know how many of you have ever been in such a circumstance. Right? For me, thank God it's only been a few times. I remember the earthquakes, when the earthquakes would come. And there's this sense, you can't do a thing about this. You just ride it out. I mean, there's a complete sense of helplessness in the face of this. God unleashes this horror on Egypt. And that's the sense you get as you read these plague narratives. And God becomes this totally ruthless destroyer. Just this ruthless destroyer. Because you could ask a question, which my brother, who's a pain in the neck normally, but usually asked at the Seder table, like, why not 5 plagues? Wouldn't 5 have been enough? I mean, it would destroy the Pharaoh. 5 plagues. It would still be horrible, but it would be half as 10. Right? Why not 5? Why 10? Why not? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mel. Thanks. That's, by the way, that's how you count people in a minyan. You know that? It's illegal in Jewish law, Jewish superstition. You're not allowed to count people. You're not allowed to count people because it somehow put cooties on. So when you're looking to see who's in the minyan, you go Dam, Svardeya, Kini, Maraver, Shkin, Makas, Bechoros. Okay, we have 10. Let's daven. That's how you do it. I'm not kidding. Yeah. Nishta, yeah. Right. Or the other one, of course, is Kanai Nahara. How old are you? 86, Kanai Nahara. This is the famous court case where the lawyer asks the witness, would the witness tell us how old he is? And the witness says, I'm 85, Kanai Nahara. Just answer the question. He says, I did. It's 85, Kanai Nahara. He says, no, stop with the other stuff. Just tell us. Yeah. Now what happens is, and then the prosecutor says, Your Honor, may I ask the witness that question? And he says, sure, try it. He says, Kanai Nahara, how old are you? He says, 86. This was 120. Right, because you can't count. You're not allowed to count. It's like superstitious. You shouldn't count. All right, so you have to gather in the horror of the thing. Okay? So where we are now in the story is toward the end. This is the last plagues. Okay? The 8th plague, which is locust, and the 9th plague, which is darkness, and then the last one, the 10th, which is the most horrifying of all. One of the senses you get as you read the plagues narrative is that what God is doing is undoing creation. It's actually an interesting little parlor game to try to connect which plague goes to which act of creation. But you have a sense that where creation turned chaos into order and created a world that we could live in that was ordered and predictable and controllable, the plagues represent the return of utter cosmic chaos. Utter cosmic chaos, right? So locusts and hail, these things that you can't control. The other sense you get is that by the end, there's not much left of Egypt. I mean, there's really an awful lot of Egypt has been destroyed. So you get to this end, and you get the 8th plague. Just take a look on page 375, please. It's chapter 10, verse 7. Pharaoh's courtiers say to him, how long shall this one be a snare to us? Let the men go and worship their God. Are you not yet aware that Egypt is lost? I mean, he's destroyed, God has destroyed the will of the Egyptians. The Egyptians who were so arrogant earlier in the story are now begging for mercy from the God that they once spurned. Okay? And Moses comes back, and his heart is still hard, and he tries to bargain with Moses. Take the men, but not the women. Right? So turn to page 376. Hold your arm over to the land for locust. And the locust came, and everything was destroyed. And now look at verse 16 on page 376. Pharaoh hurriedly summoned Moses and Aaron and said, I stand guilty, chatati ladonai. I stand guilty before the Lord your God. So at the beginning of the story, Pharaoh says, who is this God that you worship? Who is this God that you adore? I don't know this God. And now he stands in front of the same men saying, Chatati, I am at fault. The idea is that Pharaoh's been broken. Pharaoh's been broken, but not yet. Not yet, right? Because one more time, the Lord stiffened his heart, right? He has to be shown one more time what he's done. Hold your hand toward the sky. There may be darkness on the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be touched. That's a hell of a story. I mean, think about that. A darkness that can be touched. Not just the absence of light, but a dark. So there's a tremendous amount of imaginative midrash on what kind of darkness this is, right? And if you want to use this as a metaphor, when a country goes through a crisis, there comes a darkness, so that darkness is so thick. Look at verse 23. People could not see one another. When times get so bad, we cease to be neighbors. We cease to be comrades and friends. We can't see each other. That kind of darkness. So he's not only destroyed the physical infrastructure and the economic infrastructure of Egypt, he's destroyed a social network. He's destroyed the social fabric of Egypt. Nobody could see each other. There's no social solidarity left. We're at each other's throats. And that's the real destruction of a society. That there's no cohesion. There's no social cohesion. People could not see one another. 3 days they couldn't get up from where they were. Because if you get up, you bump into stuff. But all Israel enjoyed light. That's the difference, right? Finally he says, go. But God stiffened his heart again. And how comes the last one, right? And God says, I'm going to bring one more plague. And this is going to be the one. And when this one comes, you're going to go. So go borrow everything you can, because you're going to take your compensation for the years of slavery. You're going to take it with you. I want you to take it with you. You're going to take all this stuff from Egypt. And they're going to tell you to leave. So go get ready to go. Then that's the narrative. That's the flow of the narrative. That's been the flow of the narrative, the beginning of this week's Torah portion and all of last week's. Right? It goes in order. The first plague is announced. The second plague is announced. The third plague is not announced. It goes 3, 3, 3, and then 1. The last one. And then when he announces the last plague, when Moses tells God the last plague is coming, the narrative stops. And that's where we are in chapter 12. That's going to be today's focus. What's really interesting, remember, we start at the very beginning of the Torah. The Torah is not a self-conscious book, which means the Torah doesn't tell you what it is and how it's written and what it's for. You just have to sort of discover that as you read it. And we get an interesting story here. You have a narrative flow. Plague, 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 plague. And before that last plague comes, narrative stops. And a whole different narrative jumps in here. A story that's completely different. And that's what makes it so interesting. That's chapter 12. Everybody got it? So look at chapter 12. We're on page 380. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this month shall mark for you the beginning of months. What? I mean, what I'm expecting next is the story of the last plague. And I'm expecting the narrative to continue and to resolve and tell me how we're going to get out of Egypt and what's going to happen. But no, before we get to that, before we start the last plague, the narrative stops and God says, I got some more things I want to tell you. Right? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to wind your calendar back to 0. From now on, this is day 1. This is day 1 of your history. Now that's really interesting, because the Torah in Genesis begins, Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That's the beginning of natural time, and this is the beginning of historic time. You will count your years and your months from this moment. Right? Nisan is the first month of the Hebrew calendar. Not anymore, but it was originally. I want you to wind because time starts now. Time starts now. History starts today. Right? History, a lot of people, the French Revolution did that. When the French Revolution happened, it was year one. So the French counted their years. When Alexander the Great came, he counted as year one. I don't know if anybody decided to do that. On July 4th, 1776 should have been year one. Right? So this would have been the 100th year of the America. Right? But that's the idea. This is the beginning of your time. Yes, please.
He's telling the people how we're going to tell the story of an event that is yet to occur.
Yes, we're about to get to that. That's the even weirder part of the narrative. In the middle of the narrative, he's going to say, here's how I want you to preserve and protect this narrative. So you're going to ask me, why? What kind of weird story tells you how you're to remember the story while the story is happening? Does that sound strange to anybody? Yes, hang on to that thought for 30 seconds. Yes.
So there's another reading that you just reminded me of.
Yeah.
Is that God promises after Noah that he'll never or she'll never destroy another world.
Yeah.
And this is an attempt to keep that promise,
But
do everything possible to get as close to quashing that rage and that frustration.
Yeah.
From God's perspective.
So there is in the Bible, in the character of God, there is a theme that you can call the destroyer. God loses it. I mean, or God, maybe not loses it, but God, when you get God to a certain point of frustration, God unleashes unholy hell on the world.
And because of the promise.
Now, what does that say? I mean, how do you understand that? To worship a God when he wants or she wants, God can unleash holy hell. First of all, I think it reflects us. I mean, aren't we that way? Aren't people that way? I mean, aren't we that way collectively, individually? Isn't that a fantasy of ours? I mean, it's an interesting fantasy. The fantasy of there are all these movies out. You know, I watch them on HBO late at night. You know, these sort of revenge movies. Taken with Liam Neeson. You know, these guys kidnap his daughter. Turns out that he's a super spy, you know, and he says, I have a certain set of skills that are very effective in matters like this. You certainly don't want to mess with me. You know, and then for the rest of the movie, there's something very satisfying about watching him take these guys apart. You know, there's something in, and I think we have this, right? Don't people have that? Anyone here ever been cut off in traffic and had a fantasy that if I had phaser guns on my car that they would not make it home? That's why they took the phaser guns off my car, you know, because I threatened to use them on a teenage driver. You know, they took the missiles off my car because you get that fantasy of, you know, does anyone have that? You know what I'm talking about? Anyone have that? You know, you catch yourself, you know, you want to slam on the accelerator and you realize that, wait, what? For what? For that? Right? Someone cuts in front of you in the line at the bank. Someone, you know, you all have this like, I know you. God has this too, and so there's this interesting destroyer power.
And also this
unholy.
moment of not going to that very...
So this case, it's controlled, yeah.
Control.
This case, it's controlled and directed at one people. It's controlled and directed at one people. And the irony, of course, is that the Egyptians are the most powerful people in the world. So this is a theological statement. We're going to destroy the most powerful king in the world, just to show that he's not the most powerful thing on the stage of history. Yeah, Ellen. Yeah, I'm sorry, Douglas is here with the microphone. Thank you, Douglas. Sorry, Carol Merrill here.
It also feels like the moral sensitivity of the land.
The moral sensitivity of the land.
Yeah, just
Meaning what? Tell us what that is.
well, when Mother Nature fights back. For
Yeah,
all
well,
the unjust things we've been doing.
All of the plagues are natural. You notice that? There are no supernatural things happening. These are all natural occurrences. Right? That's why every couple of years somebody writes one of these foolish stories about how, oh, it really could have happened. There was an earthquake in Sudan. And But you get this idea that nature becomes the tool of God's vengeance in this case. Right? You know, so the land, nature is offended by the immorality of man, of human beings, right? Which is the moral of the 5 o'clock Channel 11 monster story, when the professor says, we were irresponsible, it's Frankenstein, we were irresponsible in the application of our science, and now nature is punishing us for it, and that's why giant grasshoppers are eating your house, Bobby. That's why the giant grasshoppers ate your mother, Bobby, you know. Sorry? Silent Spring, right. If you want to read it, by the way, there's this fabulous book called The Uninhabitable Earth. It's a book about climate change. And the book is so scary that literally, I'm not making this up, in the middle of the book, the author says, if you've read this much of the book, you're a really courageous person. He says, don't worry, the rest is more hopeful. But it's really, I mean, he goes through, he categorizes, he's a journalist, he's not a scientist, but he categorizes the existing science on climate change and talks about what happens if we push climate change 1 degree, 2 degrees, or 4 degrees. And things that you cannot begin to imagine begin happening on this planet. And it's not unlikely. I mean, it's not unlikely because the planet has to reset itself, right? Imagine all of Earth is that thermostat, right? Yes, please.
So, in the progression of becoming the Jews, the people of Israel,
Yes.
as we are right now,
Yes.
it seems like this is the beginning of a new chapter.
Yes.
So, what was our practices and what were we before Exodus? What was our practice? What did
Very
we
good
do?
question. We have the book of Genesis, which tells us something about the patriarchs and the matriarchs, right? They wandered through Canaan, sometimes outside of Canaan, settled in certain places, anointed certain places as holy places, offered offerings in certain places, but that's as much as we know. And then you have the beginning of Exodus. And because the focus has been on Pharaoh and the slavery, we don't know what the culture of the Israelites were in Egypt. We don't know. There's a lot of Midrash, for example. And the Midrash wants to make Egyptian Jews out to look like Polish Jews of the 16th century. So it says they never changed their dress, they never changed their names, and they never changed their morals. Well, first of all, we know they changed their names, because a lot of them have Egyptian names. For example, Moses. That's a pretty Egyptian name. Moses in Egyptian means son of. Masas is son of. You add the name of a god at the front, like Ra, Masas, or Ramses. Moses literally means sonny boy, junior, right? It's an Egyptian name. Pinchas is an Egyptian name. We have lots of Egyptian names in the lists of, so we know that they adopted Egyptian names. We know that they didn't practice circumcision, because in the book of Joshua it says they hadn't practiced circumcision, right? We know that they adopted lots of Egyptian things. So we don't know. You have to use your imagination, right? But your first comment is very, very important, and that's what this chapter is about. The reason why the narrative stops, the reason why the narrative of the plagues, which has this nice rhythm going up to this point, it stops. It purposely stops. The storyteller stops the story and says, hang on a minute, I want to tell you something else. And starts talking to us about the Israelites. Because you realize that the task here is not solely to get the Israelites out of Egypt. The task is to get Egypt out of the Israelites. The task isn't to get a group of slaves free. The task is to get them free of slavery, which is much more difficult. It's an internal process of changing the character of a people. And how do you change the character of a people? How do you turn them from slaves, with a mentality of slaves, into free people? The great Isaiah Berlin talked about two different kinds of freedom: freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from is liberation. Freedom from is what we call negative freedom. Freedom from bondage. Freedom from slavery. Freedom from restraint. But once you're free from restraint, you still have an important task ahead to figure out who you are and what do you want to do with freedom. And if you don't resolve that problem, you will soon find yourself back into a situation in which you're dominated by an authority, because you will choose somebody who will tell you what to be and how to be. You will always choose someone you always choose someone who is an authority to inform, to fill that gap. So how do you move from freedom from negative freedom to freedom to a vision of who we are and what we can do with this gift of freedom? And that's what this chapter is about. It's the beginning of the formation of a free people. But it isn't easy. It's what the rest of the Bible is about. It's the beginning of the formation of a free people. Yeah, please. You got to do it in the microphone so the whole world can hear you. There's thousands and thousands of brothers and sisters sitting in their pajamas this morning waiting for a question. Go ahead. And we welcome you.
Well, how can I live up to that
There you go.
introduction? So the other part about getting Egypt out of the Israelite people is that the culture of Egypt was a culture of death.
Yeah.
To worship the hereafter, to prepare for the hereafter.
Yeah, it's obsessed with death.
Obsessed with death.
Right.
And ours is a culture of life.
Right.
So that was also, I think, part of the necessity for getting the people out of Egypt.
Right.
And also begin to indoctrinate them into a different way of viewing the world and how to be in the world.
Very nice. Very, very, very good. One of the characteristics of Egyptian culture is its obsession with death. And the Bible's going to go to war with that obsession. But it's not going to make it explicit. It's not going to say, the Egyptians used to do this, you're going to do that. But there's going to be all these, I'll tell you why. Because it assumes that you know Egyptian culture, which of course you all know. Right? Okay? So, I mean, look, a moment ago, we started talking about a thing called the Super Bowl. And most of you knew what I was talking about, right? 1,000 years from now, when they find this tape, they're going to wonder, what's he talking about? What was the Super Bowl? Must have been a great religious celebration. You know, but there are things about Egyptian life that the Bible is going to comment on that are going to be subtle. I'll give you the best example. The best example is the priests of Egypt had the function of preparing people for their journey to the other world. That's principally what priests did. The priests of Israel are not allowed to touch dead bodies. If a priest touches a dead body, he's tameh and may not participate in the community as a religious leader until he goes through a ritual of purification. It was a complete opposite role, right? The priest has to be the functionary of life, not the functionary of death. Now, that's a subtle thing, but if you know Egyptian culture, you stop and go, whoa, that's remarkable. Okay? So that's exactly, you're exactly on point. Come back to page 380 with me, chapter 12. This month shall mark for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first months of the year for you. So, turn your calendar back. This is going to be the beginning of something big. And for the rest of time, this is how you're going to remember it, because this is going to be Rosh Hashanah. This is going to be the beginning of your year. When did we put Rosh Hashanah in the fall? When we went to Babylon. When we went to Babylon in 586 BCE, and we lived in Babylon as exiles, we had to date our checks according to Babylonian banks, and you can't put January 1st on a check in Nisan, they won't understand it, so we adopted the Babylonian calendar. But according to the Bible, the first day of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah. Okay? Now, speak to the whole community of Israel. God is talking to Moses and Aaron. This is on the eve of the 10th plague. And say to them, on the 10th of this month, you'll take a lamb to a family, a lamb to a household. If a household's too small for a lamb, let him share one with a neighbor who dwells nearby. In proportion number of persons, contribute the lamb according to what each household will eat. The lamb shall be without blemish, a yearling. You take it from the sheep or the goats. You'll keep watch over it till the 14th of the month. And all the assembled of the Israelites shall slaughter it at twilight, and take the blood and put it on the two doorposts and the lintel of the house in which they're to eat it. And they'll eat the flesh that night. They'll eat it roasted over fire with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. That sound familiar? What was that meal? What is your Seder? Your Seder is a reiteration of the Last Supper. I mean, our Last Supper in Egypt. Your Seder is the reiteration of a repetition of the last night. The Seder is you're pretending to be in Egypt the last night. So there's two ways to read this. And the double entendre is completely on purpose. This is Pesach LeMitzrayim and Pesach LeDorot. Pesach LeMitzrayim, he's telling the people in Egypt, this is what you're going to do in a week and a half. In a week and a half, you're going to go find a lamb. You're going to hold it in your house for 4 days. You're going to slaughter it. You're going to spritz the blood all over the door. You're going to roast it. You're going to sit at home, and you're going to eat it with matzah and maror. Get the red kind. It's not as hot as the white. Then, for Dorot, Pesach LeDorot, for the rest of time, this is what you're going to do. For the rest of time, this is what you're going to do. And it's done both. It's a complete double entendre. It understands that it's talking to you. It's a retrogression. It's talking to you as a person who's making Pesach to understand that your Pesach started there. Your Pesach started there. Your Pesach is what they did on the last night of slavery. Everybody got that? Everybody got that? Don't eat it raw. Duh. Okay? Carpaccio is not indicated. That's what it's called, right? It's like, yeah. Or cooked in with water, or roasted, head entrails over fire. You'll not leave any of it until morning, but if any is left in morning, you'll burn it. And this is how you're going to eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Now, who's he talking to? He's talking to two different audiences at the same time. He's talking to who? He's talking to the Jews in Egypt, right? On the 1st of Nisan, 2 weeks before the Exodus is about to happen. And he's giving them instructions, right? You don't have to wear a dinner jacket. You don't have to put on a gown. I want you to put on traveling clothes. Now, who else is he talking to? Us. He's talking to the generations. How are you supposed to come dressed to a Seder? Travel clothes. Travel clothes. Right? You're supposed to come, because tonight's the last night in Egypt. I told you, I had a friend who had a Seder, and he said, bring a suitcase. And when we got to the house, we realized that he cleaned all the furniture out of the apartment, and we sat on our suitcases the whole night. Now, I had this hard Samsonite, so I'm still sore. Nina had a nice soft one. I'll see you, Bruce, in 1 second. But the idea that you are coming to rehearse and replay the experience of the last night in Egypt. So you're to come dressed for travel. You're to come dressed for travel. I think, by the way, you ought to do this. I think this would make a great. This would make it. We ought to have a Seder at LAX. You know, I mean, or the Union Station. I mean, it's got to be a travel thing. You're leaving tonight. Get ready. You got to get you. And the idea is that every year you reiterate this experience, because every year I want you to feel what your ancestors felt on that night. What did they feel that night? Holy exhilaration and holy fear. Why did they feel exhilaration? Because tomorrow morning we're leaving. Why did they feel fear, Rose? It's more than that. What did you just do? You just did something. Who brought the plagues? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are a congregation. Can I get an amen? Amen. That was the dreadful Jews. Who brought the plagues? God brought the plagues. Who humiliated the Pharaoh? God humiliated the Pharaoh. Who destroyed Egyptian power? What did we do in it? Nothing. When you say, take a lamb and slaughter it and put its blood on the door lintel, no, think about this a minute. What are you doing? What are you doing? You are coming out of the closet. You are declaring which side you're on, boy. Up until now, you could hide in your house and say, maybe this Moses guy is for real. I don't think he's for real. I think he's for real. I don't think he's for real. Can you imagine the arguments that would have gone on in Jewish houses? Those who believed him, those who didn't believe him. But now, this is the first time you're going to put on the outside. What if he's a fake? What if he's false? What if Moses fails and there is no liberation that night, And in the morning, the Egyptian army comes and sees the blood on your doorpost. What's going to happen to you? I mean, think about this. This is like Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. I mean, a Jews, I'm going to tell the Nazis where I live because I believe God's going to save me? You understand what? This is the gutsiest, stupidest thing you can do. Put blood on the doorpost and declare that you're one of them. Can you imagine? And sitting up all night wondering, is God going to come and save me tonight? Or is the Gestapo going to come and steal my children? Just for a moment, breathe that in. He's asking them to do something incredibly gutsy. And there's so much more to it. So we'll come back in a second. Bruce, you get the comment.
Where do you come out on the, they baked matzot because they didn't have time to let it rise?
That comes later. Here it's not.
But here you've got plenty of notice.
Yeah.
You could be proofing that bread right now.
Proofing it. Hell, you could go get a nice rye bread, a challah epis, a pumpernickel with raisins. Why are they eating matzah? Why are they eating matzah the night before they left? Well, for one thing, because matzah, in the Seder, matzah has two connotations. At the end of the Seder, matzah is the bread we baked on our way out because we were running to freedom. But at the beginning of the Seder, right? Ha-lachma anya, this is the poor bread. Sha'achla avatana da'ara de Mitzrayim, that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt, called dichvin yete v'yesef. This is slave bread. Who eats matzah? Slaves eat matzah. Why do slaves eat matzah? Because they have the time to let bread rise. Slave doesn't have time. Slave works 15, 20, 30 hours a day, right? Slave comes home, throws the dough on the fire, whatever comes out he eats, he's starving. Slave doesn't have the leisure of letting bread rise. This is slave bread. I want you to eat slave bread. Why bitter herbs? It doesn't tell you the connotation here. Why would you eat with bitter herbs? Right? I mean, it doesn't tell you why, but you're right. You see, the menu is given here, but with no explanation. I mean, right. And I think the bitter herb here is one last taste of what you've been through before I let you out. But I want you to gather this in. You put blood on the lintel, you're coming out of the closet. You're declaring yourself. You're declaring yourself. And if this doesn't work out, and my God, I don't know how many times history somehow just doesn't work out. Do you know what you've just done to your children? Right? This is Rabbi Sho Weiss, my dear teacher, spent a great deal of his life locating Christian rescuers of Jews during the Holocaust. And it used to make him cry. Do you know what the penalty was if the Nazis caught a Christian person who had sheltered a Jew? Not just for the person, it's slaughter your whole family. You put your whole family in jeopardy. I mean, this is a crazy thing to do. But Moses says, okay, you want to be free? You want to be free? I want to see if you're ready to be free. I want to see if you have it inside. According to the Midrash, by the way, the story, the Bible's going to tell us later that Bnei Yisrael came out of Egypt, and the word is chamushim. Nobody knows what the word chamushim means. Sometimes it's translated as they were armed. They took weapons with them. Because they fight all these wars when they get out. So you wonder, where do they get the weapons from? But another midrash on the word chamushim comes from the word chamesh, which means only 1/5 came out. 4 out of 5 Jews said, hell, I'm not doing that. I'm not leaving. I'm not going to tell the Gestapo where I live. I'm not going to come out. 4 out of 5 Jews stayed in Egypt, where they are to this day, because they stayed slaves for the rest. Only 1/5 of you lunatics. Only you who are the strongest, the craziest, the stubbornest, or the most desperate said, what do we got to lose? And you did this. I mean, you understand that what's going on here is the formation of a people, and the first step of the formation of a people is, are you ready to take an affirmative step toward freedom? Do you have the guts to take a step toward freedom? Do you have the guts to declare yourself? Will you declare yourself? Right? I don't know about you, But with the kid with the clipboard in front of the supermarket who asks me for a signature, stop global warming, stop world slavery. I said, I'm busy, I have to go get pickles. Right? I have a hard time declaring myself even to that, you know? That's what Baskin Robbins drives me crazy, because I can't pick one of 31 flavors, right? Declare yourself, you are a Jew, you're an Israelite, and you hate the Pharaoh and you're ready to leave? You understand what's being asked here? I just want you to gather this in. Gather this in, okay? Ready? Oh, you want to add something, please? Oh my God, sorry. I'm sorry. Douglas, help me here.
So, Rabbi, why, today is February 1st, why is this Parsha not done during Passover?
It is. You read this again, Pesach.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because it would be more effective to kind of live it in.
Yeah, but here's the deal. The Torah reading cycle and the holiday cycle don't match. They don't match. The Torah reading cycle, they divided the Torah into 54 parshas. They gave each parsha a week, and so it's February and you're reading the Pesach story, and by the time you get to Pesach, you're going to read some other story.
Wouldn't it be more effective and powerful to read it?
I love you. I so love you. I said, wouldn't it be worth? Yeah, you know what? There's 104 things about Judaism that I would like to change. Would that be good? Would that be okay? Right? I would like to make babka a third category. Milchik, fleshik, babka. That's what I would like. I would like to make chicken pariv. I would like to make Shabbos. When there's a yontif during the week, Shabbos doesn't count. I need a work day. But when my work gets really hard, I'd like Shabbos to be 2 days. That's what I would like. I have so many. I would like to put Sukkot in the summer and Tisha B'Av in the winter. I got so many things about Torah I want to change. And you want to change that? God bless you. Right? No, I can't. I'm not the Rabbi of Ali Shalom. What do you think I am? Hey.
Hi.
How you doing, man?
Good to
It's
see
good
you.
to see you. Stevie Ann, it's good to see you.
I actually like it that it's now and not only during Passover.
Yeah.
Because for me, what I'm hearing that's so profound
Yeah.
is about transformation.
Yeah.
And about how easy it is to complain about what you got and how hard it is to make a choice to step out and do something about it.
Yeah.
Something constructive.
Right.
And that's a message that I feel I need to keep reminding myself of throughout the year, and not just during the high holy days, and not just during Passover that I've been, how have I been a slave this year, but throughout the year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So look at the next section. For that night I'll go through the land of Egypt and strike down every firstborn in the land of Egypt, man and beast. I'll mete out punishment. The blood on your houses where you're staying shall be a sign for you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. That's Pesach. The literal word meaning of the word Pesach means to skip, to jump. But come on, that can't be the reason. Come on, if Santa Claus can find all the good kids and not give presents to the bad kids, how come God needs a blood on the lintel? Come on. The post office can find me. Every junk mailer in North America can find me. God doesn't know where I live? No. The point is, I put a sign outside which says, this is who I am. I put a sign, and I'm not afraid. And I'm not afraid. Enough being afraid. Enough cowering. Enough being beaten. You haven't beaten the life out of me yet. It's the gutsiest thing he could have asked them to do. Right? And it's the beginning of their transformation into a people. Yes, please.
Thank you. The way the Torah tells us how to have the last meal, all dressed up, like you're going to go out of your house and start going into the desert,
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah.
But in the Haggadah for Passover,
Yeah.
we're supposed to recline in our chairs,
Yes.
take it easy.
Right.
So it's...
That's because the Haggadah was written in the first century when we were living among Romans. And I don't know if you ever heard this expression, but when you're doing a Seder in Rome, you know, and the Romans used to, Roman nobility if you're a working person, you remember, no one had tables and chairs. You ate on the floor. You put a blanket, a clean blanket. But a working person kneels down, eats his food, and leaves. A noble person has the leisure, the time to lean back and eat with one hand. Eating with one hand, something Jews have never learned even now. Just eat slowly with one hand. A little slower. Just eat slowly. Take your time. Contemplate the meal. Be mindful of the flavors. That's a leisurely way to live, you see? And we get to be nobility tonight. Because tonight we are free people. We're no longer in a hurry to wolf down our food before someone takes it away. Right? There's a lot of that, by the way. That's the other reason why you have 2 challahs on your table. Last night you had 2 challahs on the table, right? You had to have 2 challahs on the table. Because the idea is that if I have 1 challah, I don't know what I'm eating tomorrow. If I eat the challah tonight, I could starve tomorrow. But if I have 2 challahs on the table, that means I can take tomorrow Shabbos and not have to worry about going out and making a living. The second challah represents my freedom from my economic being. I am not a slave to the economy. I'm not a slave to my economics because I have 2 challahs on the table and I don't have to make a living tomorrow. I can contemplate Torah. You see? These are symbols of the tradition that come from the world in which they grew up. Okay? All right? I think someone's going to write a tshuva. They've been writing them already, which is in our day, the sign of Shabbos is that you turn off your cell phone. Yeah, I'm a free person. If anybody really needs to find me, they can find me for emergencies. But short of emergencies, I don't have to keep checking the damn thing all the. I don't know about you. You ever been to lunch with people who can't sit at lunch for 15 minutes without checking to see a message, a news flash, a sports you say to yourself, "Hey, I'm here, flesh and blood, right? I'm here. Put the damn thing down." They can't do it. But once a week, practice this. Once a week. Just put it away. Right? God wants to call you. Right? No one else. Okay, we got some more comments over here. Let's pass the mic around. We have to get out of Egypt today, guys. So let's get.
The tale you've told of putting the blood on the lentils, sending a message to the Egyptians, is a little backwards.
Yeah.
Because what actually the Torah says is you're to take those sheep, which are their idol, and tie them up 4 days before.
Yeah.
And when the Egyptians ask what you're doing, you tell them what you're going to do.
We're going to eat your
but
idol.
The actual slaughtering and the putting the blood is inside the house. The Egyptians can't see it. It very clearly says that it's inside.
You slaughter it in the house?
No, not that you slaughter, but that you smear the blood on the lentils, which are inside the door.
No, the lintel's on the outside of the door.
That's not what it said, though.
Well, take the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts in the lintel of the house. That's on the outside, not on the
Commentary said it's on the inside.
Does it really?
I don't know about in there, but it certainly does in the stone.
Could be.
And therefore...
No, I didn't. That I know. I always read it as outside. It's a public recognition that I am a Jew, that I'm an Israelite, and I'm not afraid of you anymore. Which is just, that's a hell of that's chutzpah. Yeah, please. Byron, hi.
We later learned that a mixed multitude went out with the Hebrews.
Yeah.
Did they put blood on their lentils?
I don't know. You would have to ask them. I don't know. Where were they here to do it? And mixed multitude. Such a great name. It's such a great.
And also the Jews that did not put blood on the.
What happened to them?
Yeah, did they die?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I mean, or if I was, I don't remember what I ate for lunch Tuesday. You're asking me what. Let's read some more. This will be a day for you of remembrance. This is such a crazy thing. It hasn't happened yet, and already he's giving them the instructions for how to remember it. You see, so the narrative is doubling back on itself. Right? In literature, you call this postmodern literature, which has no time frame. Maybe there's a guy named Thomas, what's his name, Crittenden, who writes novels. You ever read one of these novels where the time frame, what is it called? Pynchon. And the time frame's all warped. This is time warp, right? Vaya yom hazeh lachem lezikaron. It hasn't happened yet, and he's already telling you what you're going to do to remember it. You shall celebrate it as a festival in the Lord throughout the ages. 7 days you'll eat unleavened bread. On the first day, remove the leaven from your house. Oh, God, why? For whoever eats leavened bread the first day, person cuts himself off. You'll celebrate a sacred occasion on the first and on the seventh day. No work shall be done. Only what every person is to eat, that alone may be prepared for you. You'll observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Chag HaMatzot. On this very day, I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. I want you to pay attention to that phrase. You're going to see this 3 times. The same phrase is going to repeat itself 3 times with a slight variation, right? Why are you to remember this? Because this is the day that Hotzeti et Tzivotechem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I brought your Tzivotechem. Tzivot literally means an army, but it can also mean a big group of people. I brought your, what's the word? Masses? Give me your huddled masses yearning to be free, right? I brought all of you out. Tzivotechem. That's the first time it tells us that. I want you to do this because this is the day you came out of Egypt. In the first month, the 14th day of the month, you'll eat unleavened bread, and it repeats itself again until the 21st, okay? Now, go down to verse 21. Moses summoned the elders, and he gave them the instructions. Just what God said. Do it, right? Turn a page. 24, you'll observe this institution for all time. And when you enter the land, you shall observe this rite. Even when you're free, kids. Right? And notice, he says something kind of interesting. He doesn't say, when we enter the land. He says, when you enter the land. Isn't that odd? Wouldn't he have to say, when we enter the promised land, we will make this holiday? But when he says, when you enter, is he foreshadowing something that he kind of suspects? That he belongs to the generation of slavery, but it's the free people of Israel who will take the land? But when you're free, and he knows this, I mean, what's the purpose of this? When you're free, all of this is going to be strange to you. When you live as free people, all this is going to be strange to you. This is the argument I had with your brother-in-law, with Uncle Henrik, right? Henrik gave us the story. My uncle was a survivor of Auschwitz and 6 other camps. Yeah, he built Auschwitz. And when he finally told us the story, it wasn't until I was much older, when I was a rabbinical student. And we said to him, Uncle Henry, why'd you wait so long to tell us the story? And he said to us, you ever been hungry in your life? You ever been cold in your life? You ever had someone beat you? You ever have a man who sleeps next to you die in the middle of the night? He said, you couldn't have understood any of this, and you still don't. Because you're free. You grew up in freedom, America. How do you know? But I want you to remember. So we said to him, why are you telling us now if we'll never understand it? He said, because Elie Wiesel yelled at him, and Elie Wiesel said to him, if you don't tell your own children, they'll never believe it really happened, because you're a witness. He said, it happened. And what I told you was half of what happened. The other half you really wouldn't believe. And he's right. He's right. So when you are free and well-fed and warm and secure and protected, you don't want to remember this stuff. You don't want to remember you were a slave. You don't want to remember the fear, the helplessness, the humiliation, the oppression. You don't want to remember what it was like to have no control of your life. You don't remember what it was like to have no dignity in life. I want you to do this holiday every year. I want you to take a whole week, and I want you to eat slave bread and eat bitter food. And I want you to put on traveling clothes and remember what it was like to be not here and not there. I want you to feel in some facsimile form what we went through, so you won't forget who you are. And that's where he starts. This is before it actually happens, he says, right? This is Moses talking to the people of Israel, right? And you'll do this as an institution through all time when you've entered the land. And when your children, I'm on verse 26 on page 386, when your children ask you, Vaya ki yomru elechem banechem, when your kids will ask you, Ma avodah zelechem, what are you doing this for? Which is interesting, because there's 4 times in the Torah it has the phrase, your child will ask you. So that's where the Midrash comes of the 4 sons, right? But in the context, it's not wicked, wise. It's just different context. So here, that question, Mazal Vodalachem, this is the wicked child's question. But it's not wicked. Because what the kid is asking is a perfectly great question. What does it have to do with anything? Why are we doing this? What's wrong with you? Pop, Mom, we have a nice house. Why do we got to sit on the floor? We got a nice table and chairs. Mom, Pop, we got a kitchen full of bread. Why do we got to eat matzah for? Mom, we got a refrigerator full of vegetables. Why bitter? Mom, Pop, why do we have to do this? And then you have a chance to say, because you got to know who you really are. That's what you got to know who you really are. Rose, hang on, Rose, you're important.
How do we change our seders? Because it's a solemn day, even though it's celebratory, that we're free. But I never get that feeling at a Seder. That I was wandering and I was hungry.
You know why?
I would like to introduce that.
Okay, good.
That would be meaningful.
So we'll do a workshop on Seders coming up soon. But part of the idea is remember that the mitzvah is ve'avmartem, ve'agadatem labincha. Tell the story. We do everything except tell the story. We do the wine and then we sing the funny songs. Tell the story. Read this, tell the story. Yeah, please. Yeah, tell the story.
It's also a way of, in the beginning you said, well, how do you create a people?
Yeah.
You create a people by creating common rituals, a common narrative.
Common narratives, I do it.
Yes.
And rituals embrace the narrative.
Yes.
They convey
So
the
you
narrative.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. So
right.
that's the reason you have to do this, not just when it happened,
right.
throughout the ages.
Right. Common narratives. You build a people and its solidarity through a common narrative. Right now I'm going to get myself in trouble. Ready? One of the things, I'm not blaming anybody. One of the things that I fear when I look into the America that I cherish is that we are splitting into 2 narratives, not one. And it's fine to have different policy ideas. Who should be taxed and how much? Great debate. It's fine to have different ideas about what we ought to do as a country, about Iran or about Israel or Palestine or about China. It's fine to have different ideas about the laws that we ought to pass. As long as there's a common narrative that holds us together and there are rituals that embrace those narratives. But when the narrative splits and the rituals have contrary meanings, that's when a democracy, that's when a country, a democracy, a society begins to have difficulty. And that's what I see in the world. That's what I see in the world. And I'm not blaming the president and his party or the Democrats and their party. It's the circumstance of our democracy right now, to me, is serious because I see the narrative fraying, the narrative splitting. And what holds us together is a narrative. It's what makes us it's what makes us one as a people. We're a very strange people, we Americans, right? We come from 1,000 different places. We speak 100 different languages. We worship God in 300 different ways. We eat 100 different foods. And yet we all hold together as a country. In France, you speak French, eat French, walk French, worship French. In Germany, it's German. In Italy, it's Italian. In China, in Japan, it's Japan. America, it's Chinese and Japanese and Italian and French. And what holds us together is a narrative. But if you lose that narrative and it becomes fractured, what then? Right? What then? Jeffrey's a political scientist. He can tell us what then. Because he studies these things in Africa, right? What then, Professor? What then, right? When you have different groups embracing different narratives,
Don't talk to each other.
you end up with a country at war with itself.
And get their information from different sources.
Yeah, but that's part of the breaking of the narrative, because the narrative now has echo. All right, I want to finish this. Ready? So now, you ready for it to happen? Hold on. Everybody buckle your belt. Tighten your hand. 387, verse 29. In the middle of the night, the Lord struck down the firstborn in the land of Egypt. The firstborn of Pharaoh sat on the throne, of the captive who was in the dungeon, all the firstborn of the cattle. And Pharaoh rose at night with all his courtiers because there was a loud cry and there was no house where there wasn't someone dead. And he summoned Moses and Aaron at the night and he said, get the hell out of my country. Well, I put that in. Go worship your God. Take your flocks, your herds. Get out of here. And then he adds this one last thing. He said, get out of here. And then he says, right? Uberachtem gam oti. And when you go to worship your God, say a bracha from me. The arrogant man has been crushed. Bless me too. Bless me too, right? Like Esau, bless me too. And the Egyptians kicked us out. They wanted us gone, so they gave us all their stuff, right? And the people took their dough before it was leavened. Pop, there's your matzah. And they wrapped it in cloaks. And the Egyptians, as the Israelites had done as Moses bid, and they left. And they journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, 600,000 men, and a multitude of livestock, a whole bunch. And they baked unleavened cakes. I'm on 389. And the Torah says you should know that they were in Egypt 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, the very day, all the ranks left. Okay? All the ranks of... Look at that line again. Line number 31 at the top of page 389. Vayehi miket shloshim shana v'arba meot shana. At the end of 430 years... Vayehi be'etzem hayom hazeh yatsu kol tzivot Adonai. In the last verse, it was tzivotehem, your groups, your masses. Here it's tzivot Adonai. What's the difference between calling yourself one of the people or calling yourself one of the people of God? You see that? You see the difference? It's so subtle. What the Torah is saying is something changed. Those who were willing to put the blood on their doors, those who were willing to pack their clothes, those who were willing to come out of the door with Egypt. Just think about this. He says, come with me. What would you be afraid of if you were a slave? You'd be afraid that Pharaoh, having just lost his firstborn, would want nothing more than to see you dead. I mean, come on, you walk out, they're going to kill you. And besides, you've been a slave for 280 years. You've been a slave for a very long time. In the South, the house slave was given the horse and the wagon and sent into town to pick up supplies. How come he never left? How come he never left? Because either they knew they would chase him out of fear, but even worse, why did he not leave? Because he thought of himself as a slave. Because I am a slave. That's what I am. You internalize the identity. I am that slave. I can't be anything else. This is where the universe has put me. And what you're asking them to do is to say, I trust God more than I fear Pharaoh. Tzivot Adonai. I am willing to step out of the door and say, a slave no more am I. A slave no more am I. That's courage. That's a change in identity. That's an internal change. And by the way, you think they were afraid? What's courage? Courage doesn't mean doing something that you're not afraid of. Courage is being scared out of your wits, but doing it anyway. Sorry, what? A spider? Oh, in spite of. I'm afraid of spiders. No, in spite of, yes. In spite of. You're scared out of your wits. There's a sweet little kid having his bar mitzvah this morning. 6 months ago, he told his mother, he didn't want to have a bar mitzvah. His mother comes and says, what am I going to do? I said, bring him to me. So I sit with the kid. He's a sweet kid. I said, what is it? He said, and I said, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I said, oh, John, come on, Jonathan, that's nonsense. You have a great education. You know. And I said, are you scared? He said, so what are you scared of? Standing in front of all those people? He said, yeah. Singing a haftarah in front of all those people? Yeah. I said, good, me too. He said, you're a rabbi. I said, yeah, but I'm still a human being. You don't think it's scary standing up there? So I said, here's what I do. I look around. You know who I see around me? I see the cantor as my friend. I see Rabbi Hoffman as my friend. I see my friends in the congregation. I do it for them. I said, Jonathan, you do it for us. He said, really? I said, yeah. So he's having his bar mitzvah today. You're scared, but you do it anyway. You take a step forward. You take a step forward. Why? Why you take a step forward? Why would you take a step forward out of slavery into freedom if you're scared out of your mind that this might be deadly? Because slavery is hard, and because you have this dream that maybe your children will have a different experience than you. Right? So, the first time it describes them, it says, Tzivotehem, they're masses, they're hosts. The second time it says, Tzivot Adonai. Right? And now we go back, so we had halacha, we had law, then we had the narrative of what happened. Now we're going to go back to law again. Now we're going to go back to more instruction. The Lord said to Moses, this is the law, no foreigner shall eat of it, any slave a man brought in the house may be circumcised. It's only for us, it's an in-group ritual. If you want to participate in this ritual, you have to say, because I was a slave in the land of Egypt. You know how you become Jewish? Right? You say, because I was a slave in the land of Egypt, right? It shall be eaten in one house. You don't take it outside. No takeout, right? If a stranger would be with you, they can join you, but they got to be circumcised. Ouch, right? There'll be one law for the citizen and the stranger who dwells among you. In other words, any stranger who's willing to live with you and acknowledge this as slavery, they get all the rights of citizenship. And then it ends, I'm on page 390, verse 50. And all the Israelites did so as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. So they did. And look, this is the last line of the narrative. You can see that it's a summary line, right? Vayehi, which means, and so children, Be'etzem hayom hazeh, on that very day, Hotzi Adonai et bnei Yisrael miMitzrayim, al tzivotam. Now it changed it. Before it was tzivotehem, your hosts, your masses. Then it was tzivot Adonai, the people of God. And now it says, God brought who? Bnei Yisrael al tzivotam. Bnei Yisrael, they became a people that day. So what is the story? If you follow those three little clues, what do you get? They start out as a mass of people, slaves, who have only one identity. They are slaves. And slowly they become a people of God, who trust God enough to dream that there might be a better tomorrow for their children, and they're willing to take this enormous risk to take freedom for their children. And when they take that risk and they look to each other and they say, you're doing it and I'm doing it and they're doing it and they're doing it, we are a people, we are one. What makes you B'nai Yisrael is no longer that you were born into this people. It's that you were willing to put the blood on the lintel. You were willing to step out in the middle of the night. You were willing to follow Moses to freedom. You were willing to take the risk. You were willing to dream of freedom. You're part of us. I don't care who your parents were. I don't care what your ethnic background is. You were willing to say freedom is a gift from God, and I'm willing to take the chance to gain it. You're one of us. And that's the national development. That's the development of a national character through chapter 12. Okay, as far as I got the last question, because I got to go bar mitzvah this beautiful kid.
So we were slaves and we are getting out of being slaves, but why condone buying a slave and them being able to eat something once they have been circumcised?
Because the institution of slavery to some extent remained part of Israel. The Bible doesn't outlaw slavery. It just sets a bunch of conditions on it, okay? So if you have a slave slavery is still an institution in the community. It doesn't outlaw slavery. The rabbis outlawed slavery, but the Bible didn't yet, because it was such an important part of the civilization. But it sets some conditions on it. But the condition here is remarkable, right? If a foreigner lives among you, even if that foreigner is a slave, and that foreigner says, I want to share in the life of the people of Israel, what you do is you circumcise, if it's male, obviously, you circumcise that male, and you invite him to the Seder table. And they become part of you, right? Even if they're not born. You don't have to be born Jewish. You just have to tell the story of the slavery and the freedom in the first person. If you're willing to say, I was a slave and now I'm free, you become part of us. That's a remarkable thing, right? It's a remarkable idea about citizenship. Citizenship is based on your affirmation of a narrative and the implications of that narrative, not on your ethnic background. That's why at the beginning of the Seder, what do you say? The beginning of the Seder, you say, Kol dichvin yetei v'yesev. Anyone who's in need, come and eat with us. Anyone who is unfree and wants to be free, come and enjoy the food of freedom. It's an invitation to anyone who wants to be part of our circle to join our circle, no matter what you're born. Because the idea here is that the identity of this people is rooted not in ethnics, not in blood, not in genetics. I mean, 23andMe be damned, you know. It's rooted in your affirmation of this narrative and your willingness to have the courage to say, I'm not afraid anymore, or I am afraid, but I'm going to take a step toward freedom. That's what chapter 12 is about. I got good news for you. You ready? Next week, we're free. Next week, we're going to give away the ending. We're going to cross the Red Sea. And we're going to sing Dayenu for the first time. So come back next week. We'll see you. Take care.